We return to our top story of a proposed bill that could be the first such law in the world to grant police unprecedented power to stop the banking transactions of scam victims who refuse to believe evidence that they are being scammed. If passed, this power would be used as a last resort. What does the proposed bill mean for banks and their customers? We put that question to Mr. Beaver Chua, Head of Anti-Fraud at OCBC. Welcome to the program. Your thoughts on what this is going to mean for banks to work with police to stop transactions of potential victims? Is this unprecedented, something not done in any other part of the world?
I think this is really the first in the world. This is something very unprecedented, and probably we will be one of the test market or the test country that will implement such regulations, to protect our consumers.
And this essentially means that police will be given more empowerment to block such transfers. But what about the banks? Will it mean putting more staff to work with police on this? And is it going to be resource heavy in any way to implement for the banks?
I think from the bank perspective, over the years, we have been really piling up the resources to fight against scam. Just in OCBC's case, we've been putting in staff to run 24/7 surveillance, as well as funds tracing over at the Anti-Scam Command. So I think this is really not something new, and it's something that we are working out with the police on the final details on how we can do this better. In terms of processes, streamlining it so that the existing resource is sufficient to tackle the new restriction order that will be implemented.
How much work will the banks have to do? Will they need to do their own checks before acting on the police instructions?
Yes, we will have to do our own checks before acting on the police instruction. It also depends on the complexity of the relationship that the customer has with us. For example, credit facilities, credit cards, loans, things that, give the customer some control on how much money they can hold on to. For example, they could have credit facilities they could draw down to transfer to a scammer. So it really depends on what type of facilities they have with us to probably even encash and risk transferring out to the scammer.
As we understand, each restriction order will last up to 30 days at a time, but can be extended up to 5 times if necessary. Let's look at this from the point of view of the victim. Will they not get frustrated with banks for withholding what is essentially their own money?
I'm sure they will be. To be honest, I think from some of the cases that we have seen so far, the victims themselves or the customer themselves are so spellbound by the scammers' promises, and even in the case of love scam, in the case of investment scam, they're absolutely spellbound. There will be some level of frustration, but I think once they come to their senses, they will understand that this is really an added protection for them to make sure that their money, their wealth don't get depleted to scammers. Definitely a bit of friction here and there, but I'm sure we will be able to work it through as an industry with the police to help the victim, not the scammer.
And MHA has said that those subjected to these orders will still have access to their money for legitimate reasons, such as daily living expenses and paying of bills. But what happens if the affected person appeals for urgent funds? Will the process be quick enough during an emergency?
Okay. On this part, we are really working with the police to streamline such incidents. We're actually going through from the industry perspective, with the police as well, what scenario, how do we then process it? What's the timeline that we can work on? Things like this. We are working through the details, and this is definitely one of the areas that we want to make sure that the customer doesn't suffer because of the restriction order. And to be honest, looking at a number of cases, we don't think there's a lot of cases coming up with this situation.
Okay, so but what are banks like OCBC doing to in anticipation of these issues? How are you planning to address these problems?
We are working on a set of process that we can turn around as quickly as we can. For example, maybe if the police can tell us the order that they need the money by tomorrow, give us a day turnaround, we should be able to set up the branch for them to come down and facilitate the withdrawal and so on. So we are working through all these details to see how we can do it quite quickly without much delay.
All right, Mr. Chua, some would say that this is hindering the freedom of account holders. Your view on that?
I totally agree with you with this. And if you ask me if it happens to me, whether do I like my freedom to be hindered, my answer is I absolutely dislike it. But is it something necessary to be done to protect the customer, to protect the victim? Unfortunately, this has to be done. And this is just one of the tools added to the existing toolkit that we have to fight against scammers. And I really hope that we don't have to use this often because it does add a lot of restriction on the customer's perspective as well.
All right, Beaver Chua, Head of Anti-Fraud at OCBC. Thank you.